Welcome to the channel. My name is Jason, and here I talk about all things story. The story I'm talking about today is the novel titled Goblin by Josh Malerman. This is a book I finished a little while ago, I think a month ago or so. I've been meaning to review it. If you don't know of Josh Malerman, I first learned of him with the novel Bird Box, which then shortly after became a film on Netflix. I really enjoyed the writing. I enjoyed the atmosphere, I enjoyed the characters, I enjoyed the line-by-line work, the prose itself. What I did not enjoy, however, was the ending. It just kind of fell flat for me. The next novel I read of his was called Mad Black Wheel. And again, I was just completely enthralled by the concept. I was hooked immediately, following these characters on this mysterious journey to unfortunately find myself at a very disappointing ending. And then the final novel I read of Josh Malerman was titled Inspection. And again, this one, unfortunately, I think from the very beginning did not hold my interest. I did finish it, however. It's not a very long novel, but this was the first time that Josh Malerman did not completely capture my attention throughout. So needless to say, I really enjoy this writer. For all of his faults, his endings that seem to not quite land for me, I enjoy the worlds he creates, and I enjoy the characters, and really, as a writer myself, I enjoy learning from him. So Goblin, what is it? Well, it is a strange title for a novel, right? There is a town called Goblin. That is where the book title comes from. And it is, as described on the cover, as a novel in 6 novellas. Me, on my journey of writing a lot of short stories and really appreciating shorter fiction in general, I thought this was a cool concept. I was intrigued, and so, again, I dove into the world that Malerman created, and I was hooked immediately. It begins with a prologue of a man making a delivery, a strange delivery. It's in a large box. It's late at night. The town of Goblin means something to this young man due to a past relationship, but this box has very strange instructions. It must be delivered at precisely a certain time, and if it is not, he needs to destroy it, and there's some couple other rules I think in there that I'm forgetting because it's been a little while since I read it. But anyway, you get the idea. Mysterious box, mysterious town, mysterious rules. So I was intrigued. After the prologue, we are introduced to these 6 novellas. The first one being very interesting about these young kids growing up in Goblin, one of whom meets a very strange girl with strange requests. Then the second one is about a man who lives in fear of being scared to death. And so his entire apartment is dismantled of all walls. He sleeps on a transparent bed just so he can't be frightened whatsoever. Then we learn of a man in the third story. He was a big game hunter, and he is determined to capture the mythic owl who lives in the great forest of Goblin. And the next story is kind of Ray Bradbury-esque. It's about a magician, touted as the greatest magician who ever lived. But the story follows a young boy who discovers that this great magician, who he idolizes very much, is performing in his town, which is, of course, Goblin. Finally is a strange tale about a zookeeper, and the very end is about a man who creates this immaculate hedge maze in Goblin itself, burying a secret somewhere inside. So you can tell, all of these hooks, all of these concepts are very, very interesting. So I think what I'd like to say first here is what I really appreciate about this novel, and that is that we have these 6 tales. They're all connected in some way. Some a little bit more than others, but the town of Goblin is the persistent part of the narrative. It almost felt to me like Josh Malerman was trying to do something like Stephen King does with his Castle Rock setting, where you have a shared world, so to speak, where multiple stories and characters are crossing paths, and I really like that idea, and I believe that Stephen King was inspired as well by H.P. Lovecraft, who obviously had Arkham, among other fictitious towns, but Arkham being the most famous. So I really like that concept. I like the concept of creating a location, creating a shared universe, something as small as a town. There's just something creepy about it. There's something claustrophobic about it, knowing that it's not a sprawling landscape with infinite possibilities, but there's something about the size of it and the nature of it that makes it creepy, and I really like that about this novel. So atmospherically, Josh Malerman, again, knocks it out of the park. I love that aspect here. The character work. Let's talk about the characters. My favorite thing, usually, here the characters are very fleshed out. Now, the one thing to note about this novel is it's told in an omniscient voice, which to me isn't quite my favorite. Sometimes I did feel like it was stuck in the perspective of a character for a long period of time, only to jump to somebody else. And to me, it just was right on that line of being, third person, but like a close third person, only for me to realize that he was hopping into other heads when there were more characters present. And another thing, very few characters in this novel per each story. And if you know anything about my taste, that rings true to me. So love that aspect too. And so I think that's probably why the omniscient voice wasn't quite as apparent on the surface. But yeah, everybody had their own quirks. Everyone felt very distinct. It's hard to say how empathetic I was toward them because, again, these are very short tales. However, we do establish that each character has a flaw, has a problem, has a desire, which is key to empathy in storytelling. And I believe for the most part, he succeeds here. And where he doesn't succeed, I believe there's enough mystery and intrigue to where it keeps your attention. So let us talk about the writing itself, or as I like to call it, the cinematography of writing. I really like the way Josh Malerman writes. Outside of his choice of omniscient voice, which I'm not a fan of, his writing is punchy, it's crisp. You don't ever feel like he's overwriting. You don't ever feel like there's words that he just doesn't need, or he goes on tangents that are just unnecessary. If there's anything I can say about Josh Malerman, his writing is pretty tight. And I noticed that way back when I read Bird Box, and it's kind of a less is more thing here, where his writing is minimal, but it's colorful, and it gives you just enough for your imagination to fill in the blanks. And he does some really interesting things with exposition here that I really appreciated from a technique standpoint, and it's something that I'm always trying to look for is new ways to make the words on the page more interesting and be more than just the words on the page. And there was a really fascinating way he was able to execute exposition without it feeling like exposition. I won't spoil it for you because it does, to a degree, spoil part of the story. But I will tell you what novella it happens in, and that is the very first one, just after the prologue. So keep an eye out if you're a writer. I think you'll really appreciate it. So unfortunately, as much as I love the atmosphere, as much as I love the writing, as much as the characters came to life and had their own quirks and intricacies, I felt like the ending fell flat. There is an ending here. Every single tale has an ending because there are 6 novellas. Some of them I felt were better than others. I felt the first story ending was really, really well done, and I've had kind of a scary stories, if you guys remember that book from when you were a kid, when I was a kid anyway, vibe to it. The entire thing feels very folklore-y, I guess you could say. He has definitely created a living, breathing town called Goblin, and I love the fact that he had the balls to call a town Goblin, and then let alone call the novel Goblin, when it's not about goblins at all. But yeah, all I can say is, you're following these stories and you're trying to, figure out where things are going to go, but hoping that you are deceived, that your expectations are subverted. But unfortunately, we just don't get that here. I think the books end kind of on a flat note. Not terrible by any stretch, but not great either. They're not those last lines that kind of linger in your mind and haunt you. And quite possibly one of the most interesting tales, which is the prologue, it leaves you on a cliffhanger right before this man is making a delivery. And then you delve deep into Goblin with these 6 novellas, only to come back to the epilogue to see the conclusion of that prologue. And it's just all right, I didn't put this book down feeling as if I was satisfied. Having gone on a grand adventure, a spooky adventure, any kind of discovery or revelation with any characters. But I still think it's a good read. It was a good Halloween read for me. I read it in October. So despite its flaws, I still recommend you read this novel. It's a good one. If you like Malerman, I think you will like this one. Which means I'm going to give Goblin by Josh Malerman a 7 out of 10. Great atmosphere, great writing, pretty good characters. Unfortunately, as is with most of Malerman's novels, in my opinion, the endings fall flat. They just don't come together. It's not very satisfying at the end, but still, I believe the journey is worthwhile. So if you would like to see me create and not just critique, please check out my series, Worth 1,000 Words, where I write a 1,000-word short story inspired by a piece of artwork. And I'm also doing NaNoWriMo this year, so if you're a writer or just interested in storytelling or just want to hang out, come join my streams. I've been streaming every day for a couple hours trying to get this crazy novel written. It's been a lot of fun. Been hanging out with a lot of the same people I did last year, so it's great to see them again. But if you would like to support the channel, give me a like if you like the video. Subscribe if you like story-related content. Check out my longer form books in the description below. And thanks again for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.